Hey, welcome to this video about hips. My name is Noah East, and if you are going to continue watching this, it's probably because you know you have some sort of hip issue. You have lower back pain. You have some sort of issue that you're aware of. Maybe you're aware of pelvic tilt or imbalance in one way or another. And in any case, it is causing some sort of bad thing, or you want to prevent more bad things from happening in the future. Sometimes things don't hurt that bad, and you think, oh, I could tolerate this, whatever, but it means that it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And we do not want to end up getting any of these, like spinal conditions, any bulging discs, or anything like that. So that's why this is extremely important to figure out. I used to have really bad pelvic tilt. I know you're tired of hearing that story. Yes, I went through all of these things, and they're all connected. And the hips, more than anything else, are probably the most important because they're the center of the body, right? Your spine cannot be in alignment. It's going to be out if your hips are out. Your knees cannot be in alignment and happy if your hips are out. Like they're just not. And your feet are going to be affected by that. Everything in the body is affected if your hips are out. That's why this is so important. And let's talk about a few of the ways that this can happen. Hey, before we go on, I wanted to build some clarity on what are we talking about? Because the hips can be a little bit of a confusing joint. We definitely need to know our stuff here. When we're talking about the hips specifically, technical term, right? The hip is actually the femur inserting into the socket there. That's the hip. And of course, there's a whole bunch of muscles that are part of that joint, right? It's a pretty darn complicated joint. But beyond that is the pelvis. And these are kind of like two elephant ears. I say elephant ears because they actually move independently of each other more than most people think. You can see here, that's actually a cartilage joint, just like your ribs move a little bit, your nose moves a little bit. This cartilage joint also moves, and it allows mobility in a few different directions, right? You can move up and down with your hips, right? When you're jumping and running and whatnot, there's a certain amount of up and down. Basketball players, high jumpers and whatnot, they generally have a really strong mobile hip that allows them to perform like that. Also, when you're running and walking, the hips are kind of swiveling forwards and backwards, which each step in turn. And all of these movements are very important for smooth, efficient stride, right? And if you're locked up, if the mobility is limited through any of these joints that are restricting that, then you tend to look kind of stiff and awkward. And honestly, a lot of people walk like they're stiff and awkward, and they're lacking strength, stability, and mobility here. Now, obviously, you can see there's a pretty significant tilt. It looks like there's an elevated left hip here as well. So that would be causing who knows what issues, probably some back pain. We don't know what the rest of the system looks like here. We need a full picture to understand and see how it moves so we can identify things correctly and find the root cause of the issue. But yes, this is the pelvis. This is the hip, right? You've got the joints back here that connect into your spine, your sacrum. All of these, we need to make sure are working properly if we want that pain-free peak performance that we're going for. So I hope that clears things up and makes things easier to understand here as you're working on your own core health. That's probably a more accurate term. You got your pelvic girdle, you got your hip, you got your lower back. It's the center of the body here, connecting the lower body to the upper body. We want all of this to be in as good a shape as possible. I'm going to start with the funny angle here. You probably never looked at yourself from either of these angles. If you did, you might be scared. We're going to talk about shoulders in a second, but most tennis players, shoulders are way forwards. The shoulders are out here. There could be all sorts of scary things happening, and usually in an imbalanced way. One shoulder is actually way further forwards than the other. Very common with a lot of asymmetrical sports that create imbalances that way. But with the hips, this will show up in the feet. So if you do your little posture dance, right, you stand up, eyes closed, look down, is one foot more in front of the other? We're going to talk about other things that can show up in the hips too, but this is a big one because it's actually a rotation in this plane, and that's a pretty severe core imbalance that we'd want to work on really fast before things get more injury prone, to say the least. That is not a good foundation to live your life from, to play sports from by any means, but it's fixable. We do want to see just your body naturally knowing where even is. Yes, you go out, play your asymmetrical sports, And then we need to bring the body back to neutral. That is a primary rule. And so that's one of the things that we need to be aware of, right? So you're already here, you're already taking steps, but we need to do something else. If you're watching this video, it's because like you have not found that perfect pain-free peak performance that you were going for. So what are these steps? We talked about rotation. You probably are also aware that there can be, you're probably aware that sometimes hips look like they are one's higher than the other. Or you might say, oh, one leg is longer than the other one. Unless you had severe growth plate trauma as a child, that is extremely unlikely. It is much more likely that your hips are out, and so it looks like one leg is longer than the other. Your hips are not out because one leg is longer than the other, unless you've had like some sort of major trauma. You know, I did know somebody who actually shattered his femur, and then they put it back together, and they didn't have, you know, as much bone because it was crushed, and they didn't do a good surgery, and so it was actually shorter, and so his leg was actually shorter. And yes, his hips were out because of the leg. That was a very special circumstance, and in that case, you know, short of going in there and reconstructing a whole bone from the inside out, he opted for a custom-made shoe that was precisely the length of the shortened femur to compensate. So he just wore shoes inside and outside. You know, it is a solution that ended up working for him because of that giant trauma. But you probably just have out hips, or not. Maybe it's more important to focus on, where is it? Your anterior pelvic tilt, which almost everybody has these days. It's hard to find somebody who doesn't have it. And when you do, you go, oh my goodness gracious, that person's posture looks really good. A lot of people are doing the Donald Duck butt thing, and they're sticking their butt out, right? There's a lot of curve in the lower back. It makes the butt look bigger. It is not attractive. It is not healthy. It does not make the lower back happy at all. We zoom in here. You can imagine if there is a greater and greater pelvic tilt, that means that there's more and more pressure along these guys. You know, a lot of you have L4, L5 issues, you know, or fusion somewhere in here. Not you directly, I hope. But if you did have a fusion, or if you know anybody that's ever gotten a fusion here because of a bulging disc or whatever, that doesn't solve the issue. You know, sure, if they fuse it, then that disc isn't going to bulge anymore. But guess what? If you don't fix the pelvic tilts, then the problem is just going to go to like one of these other vertebrae. Like you're totally not solving the issue at all just by getting spinal fusions, and it sucks. You lose mobility. Your spine's supposed to be able to move so it can do things and twist and rotate and like do sports. If you fuse it, then it doesn't work. Honestly, it like makes me really mad that people think surgery is like their only hope. I just know people after people who've gotten back surgery, and like their life is even worse afterwards, like way worse. It hurts. They're in bed for like 2 months. It's just a massive downward spiral, and you don't want this. You don't want your back spasming because nerves are being pinched. Even just from like a little bulging disc, little compressed disc, whatever it is, like this wrecks lives. And please do something about it. Take a step. Take a step towards this. Take a step towards coming into a place where you can love life again, because that is so hard when you have back pain. I know this is important to you, and it starts with these hip muscles and these abdominal muscles. We're going to get into that more. There's going to be another video about core training. But with anterior pelvic tilt, which causes a lot of the issues we see with lower back pain specifically, what we're seeing is long abdominals, long muscles here, short muscles here, long muscles here. And again, there's a lot of them with fancy Latin names. You don't need to know all of them, right? You do need to know that like they're there. And so there's all of these complicated inner muscles that like connect to the femur and like rotate the femur and whatnot. So if your knees are pointing out, remember from the last video, these muscles are largely responsible for that femur rotation. And then above that, you've got these muscles that are largely responsible for pelvic tilt and all of that stuff. And then they're not in this picture, but you've got like abdominals, you know that. You've got abdominals, you've got lower back muscles and whatnot, which also control different parts of the pelvic tilt. To not make this video way too complicated, I'm just going to say, like usual, I don't want to waste your time and focus on the wrong things or possibly make things worse. A lot of people are out there saying, fix your pelvic tilt in 2 minutes with this exercise. They have no idea where you are, what you're going through, if you can even get into that position. You know, I'm guilty of this myself. You know, you record an Instagram clip or whatever saying, hey, you know, this will give you good abs and stop your lower back pain, but like that's such an ineffective strategy for the vast majority of people who might have rotation, they might have a shoulder injury, they might have a knee injury that developed that issue in the first place, and like it's just be so much more effective to get the coaching that you need to fix this properly. I remember like my dad, when he got his knee injury at the martial arts tournament, obviously he couldn't walk on it for a very, very, very long time, so the hips went out because he was hobbling around in this funny way. Hips went way out, like, and that was the root of his back pain to a large degree. And over the years, it got worse and worse and worse and worse. You know, I saw this, like the knee injury was when I was like 11 years old, right? Wheel him in a wheelchair, and then the hips go out. Oh man, the spiral of that, of like not being able to sleep for more than 2 hours, of buying new mattresses, hoping for something, like that was not good. He needed to get the help that he did. Thankfully he did, and like now he can sleep on any mattress. He feels great. He can sleep through the night. He's not on any muscle relaxants. He doesn't have back spasms. He can work all day. He can lift heavy stuff. He can work out. He feels better after working out instead of worse. This is huge, and I don't want you to make the mistakes like I did, like my dad did, who, you know, unfortunately waited for things to get really, really bad before he realized like, oh, my hips are out. Oh, I need to like do something differently, and not just out in one way, right? He needed a step-by-step plan to fix the pelvic tilt, to fix the rotation, and to fix the leveling, because all of those things went out with a knee injury, but they can also come out just from like one of my clients. She admitted she'd had a heavy purse on one side of her body her whole life, and she was always like leaning because of that compensation. She'd always had that lean for about 50 years, right? She'd been doing this. Same with the moms who have a baby and they always carry the baby on the one side. Like the body's going to be adapting, and that could be throwing the hips out pretty badly. Same if you snowboard, same if you play tennis, same if you play golf, and you're strengthening the body in a way that's probably going to throw the hips out unless you're very deliberate about training imbalances, about bringing the body back to neutral. The law of opposites holds true here, but we need to know like which order to work in, especially if you're in back pain right now. Like, I know how it feels. I exercised. I admit, like, I did stupid exercises when I was a teenager and gave myself really bad back pain. I gave myself, you know, these issues because I was lifting things I shouldn't have lifted with bad form that I shouldn't have had, and I was doing stupid ab exercises trying to get a six-pack, right? I don't want you to make those mistakes. So let's do things right. Make sure that we are building strength from the inside out, building deep alignment and strength so you feel great and so you can do the things that you like and so you can train without risk of injury. This is so important. And like, I want to be able to help you. I don't want to give you bullshit information though. So don't go for the quick fixes that don't work. You know, go for the root cause. And if it takes you a little bit of time because you need to go through the whole you know, like build deliberate awareness of where you are at right now, get specific practices for what to do next and integrate, then we can do it. We can totally do it. Book that call. I know I said it before, like some of you have been on the fence for so long. You're trying to get like all the free information, but like, what, you still have back pain. How long has it been? It's been years. And I'm just calling you out, like, that's ridiculous. Like, what are you doing? That is the self-sabotaging habit that's holding you back, is that, like, you're not taking the step. So I'm calling you out. Just go do it. Take the step. Follow through with it. Show up. Be honest with yourself. Like, you don't want this. What do you have to lose? You know, I'm going to give you some exercises. I'm going to give you some free stuff. Like, I want to make sure that you actually are able to live the life that you want. And that's good for me too, because I want to live in a world full of happy people, healthy people doing amazing things in the world. I just want the world to be a better place, for my kids too. And that means you doing your work, you raising the best family that you can, you enjoying your sports and finding ways to work that make the world a better place too. And like, that's so hard when you're in pain. When you're in pain, you're really selfish because like you're just thinking about yourself and your pain and you want to get out of pain. Like, it's not useful to the world. So please, for all of us, take the darn step for your future, for your family. Like, what else are you going to do with your life if you're held back by back pain? Stop. Go take a call.